Hunters attacked a poor waitress at midnight until the vampire king landed between them. The silver blade was 3 inches from piercing Elena's heart when the night itself seemed to fracture, and a figure in black materialized between her and death, catching the hunter's wrist with such force that bones audibly cracked. Wait, before the next revelation happens. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. Elena collapsed against the brick wall of the alley behind Rosie's diner, her uniform still damp with dishwater, her hands trembling as she watched the stranger twist the hunter's arm until the blade clattered to the ground. The streetlight at the mouth of the alley flickered, casting the scene in stuttering shadows. But even in that inconsistent illumination, Elena could see that her savior was impossibly beautiful and utterly terrifying. "You dare," the stranger said, his voice like silk dragged over broken glass, "to hunt in my territory?" The hunter, a burly man with crosses tattooed up both arms, tried to wrench free. "She's marked. We tracked the signature from the cathedral murders." "She is nothing of the sort." The stranger released him with a contemptuous shove. "Leave, now, before I forget the Concord and paint these streets with your brother's blood." 2 more hunters emerged from the shadows behind their companion, crossbows raised. Elena's breath caught. She'd been taking out the trash, nothing more, ending her double shift at midnight as she did 5 nights a week, trying to scrape together rent for the basement room she shared with 2 other girls. She had no idea why these men had surrounded her, why they'd started speaking of demons and abominations, why they'd attacked. "Step aside, vampire," one of the newcomers said. His crossbow was trained on the stranger's chest. "The girl bears the mark of Cain. We have jurisdiction under the Treaty of Prague." "The mark of Cain," the stranger repeated, and something in his tone made Elena's skin prickle. He turned, just slightly, and for the first time she saw his face fully. Sharp cheekbones, pale skin that seemed to glow in the darkness, eyes that reflected the dim light like a cat's, but gold, not green. "Show me." Before Elena could protest, he was before her, moving faster than her eyes could track. His hand, cold, so cold, touched her throat just above her collarbone, where her uniform's neckline began. His fingers traced something she couldn't see, and his expression transformed from contempt to fury. "Who did this to you?" I don't know what you're talking about." "Someone marked you with blood magic, old magic, Vatican magic." He turned back to the hunters, positioning himself between Elena and them once more. "She didn't place this mark. Someone branded her, made her a target. She's innocent." "Doesn't matter," the first hunter said, retrieving his blade from the ground, his broken wrist already wrapped in what looked like a blessed bandage that glowed faintly. "Marked is marked. She'll turn, or she'll be used as a vessel. Either way, she dies tonight." The stranger smiled, and Elena saw his fangs extend. "No, she doesn't." What happened next would haunt Elena's dreams for months. The stranger moved like lightning, like wind, like death itself. He didn't kill the hunters. She realized later that this was deliberate, a choice. But he incapacitated them with brutal efficiency. Broken bones, torn ligaments, crushed weapons. In less than 30 seconds, 3 trained hunters lay groaning in the alley, and the stranger stood untouched, not even breathing hard. He turned to Elena, and his fangs had retracted. "Come with me, now, unless you'd prefer to wait for their reinforcements." Elena looked at the hunters, at the vampire, at the dark mouth of the alley leading back to the diner where she'd worked for 2 years, where nobody had ever noticed her except to complain about cold coffee or slow service. She thought about the basement room, the 3 jobs, the bone-deep exhaustion that had become her normal state since she'd aged out of the foster system at 18. She thought about the invisible mark on her skin, about being hunted. "Where?" she whispered. "Somewhere they won't follow. Somewhere we can determine who marked you and why." He extended his hand, still cold, still terrifying. "My name is Victor. I am the vampire king of this city and 7 others, and as of this moment, you are under my protection." Elena stared at his hand. Behind them, one of the hunters groaned and began crawling toward a fallen crossbow. Victor didn't even glance back. "Decide," he said simply. Elena took his hand. It was like gripping ice, but his fingers closed around hers with surprising gentleness. The world lurched, and suddenly she was moving faster than physics should allow, the alley blurring into darkness, then city lights streaming past like fire trails, then darkness again. When the world solidified, she stood in an apartment so luxurious it seemed pulled from a movie set. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that probably cost more than she'd earn in a decade, art on the walls that looked original and ancient. She stumbled, dizzy, and Victor steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a leather sofa. "I'll fetch something for the shock. Humans react poorly to supernatural velocity." "I'm going to vomit," Elena managed. "Bathroom, 3rd door on your left. Quickly." She ran, barely making it in time. The bathroom was all marble and gold fixtures, absurdly opulent, and she felt grotesque retching into a toilet that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. When she finally emerged, shaking and pale, Victor stood in the hallway holding a crystal glass filled with something amber. "Whiskey," he said, "the best I have. It will help." Elena took the glass with trembling hands and sipped. The liquid burned, but warmth spread through her chest, settling her stomach. She followed Victor back to the main room and sank onto the sofa, suddenly aware of how she must look. Stained uniform, scuffed shoes, hair escaping its practical bun. Victor stood by the windows, silhouetted against the city lights. "Tell me everything about the past month. Any strange encounters? Anyone new in your life? Anywhere you visited that felt unusual?" "There's nothing to tell," Elena said. "I work 3 jobs. I sleep. I work again. That's my entire life." "Where do you work?" "Rosie's Diner, night shift. Greenfield Library, weekend mornings, and I clean offices in the financial district on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons." She took another sip of whiskey. "I'm nobody. I don't know anyone important. I don't go anywhere except work and home." Victor turned, his golden eyes catching the light. "The mark on your skin is a hunter's brand. It's used to tag potential vampire vessels, humans whose blood chemistry makes them ideal hosts for possession rituals. Someone identified you, marked you, and reported you to the Hunters Guild. But I've never even met a vampire before tonight. I didn't know they were real until half an hour ago." "You weren't marked because you met a vampire. You were marked because someone wants to use you." He crossed to a desk and retrieved a leather-bound book, flipping through pages covered in symbols and diagrams. "The Mark of Cain is specifically designed for the ritual of transference, an ancient ceremony where a vampire's consciousness is transferred into a human body, granting the vampire the ability to walk in daylight and blend seamlessly with human society." Elena set down the glass before she dropped it. "Someone wants to possess me? Someone wants to sell you to a vampire who would possess you, yes. The black market for suitable vessels is extensive and profitable. You would have fetched a considerable price." Victor closed the book. The hunters, ironically, were trying to prevent that. They execute all marked humans rather than risk them becoming vessels. So, I'm either going to be possessed or executed. Elena heard her voice rising toward hysteria and couldn't stop it. Those are my options? No. Victor's voice cut through her panic like a blade. There is a third option. I remove the mark. Hope flared. You can do that? Yes, but the ritual requires preparation, and more importantly, we need to identify who marked you. If we don't, they'll simply mark you again, or worse, escalate to direct abduction. He moved closer, sitting on the sofa across from her. I need you to think carefully. In the past month, has anyone touched this spot? He indicated his own throat, the place where he'd touched her. A brush of fingers, perhaps in a crowded place? A stranger bumping into you? Elena closed her eyes, trying to remember. Work, sleep, work again. The library was quiet, mostly regulars. The offices she cleaned were empty when she worked. The diner was the cathedral, she said suddenly. 3 weeks ago. I volunteered to help serve meals at the St. Michael's soup kitchen. They were short-staffed, and someone from the diner mentioned it. Victor leaned forward. Continue. There was a priest, youngish, maybe 30. He was helping organize everything. At one point, I was carrying a tray and almost dropped it, and he steadied me. He touched my shoulder. No, higher. My throat. She opened her eyes. He said something in Latin. I thought it was a blessing. Describe him. Dark hair, really intense eyes. He had a scar here. She traced a line down her left cheek. And he wore this ring, really ornate, with a red stone. Victor's expression turned grim. That was no priest. That was Father Matthias, formerly of the Vatican's Sacred Congregation. He was excommunicated 15 years ago for conducting illegal rituals. He stood, pacing to the windows. He's been operating in the shadows ever since, brokering deals between wealthy vampires and the vessels they desire. If he marked you, he already has a buyer. What do? We need to draw him out. If I remove your mark without neutralizing him, hell targets someone else. Worse, hell know I've interfered, which will start a war between the hunters and the vampire courts. The concord that keeps this city from becoming a bloodbath is fragile. Victor turned. I need you to be bait. Elena laughed, a sharp, broken sound. Of course you do. Why would tonight get any better? I won't let harm come to you. You have my word. The word of a vampire king? Forgive me if I'm not immediately comforted. I have ruled for 3 centuries, Victor said quietly. In that time, I have broken my word exactly once, and the guilt of that failure has haunted me every night since. I do not make promises lightly, Elena. If I say you will be safe, you will be safe. There was something in his voice, some echo of ancient pain that made Elena believe him. Or perhaps she was simply too exhausted to do anything else. What's your plan? Matthias will have people watching for you. When you don't die in the alley, when the hunters report that I claimed you, he'll know his deal is in jeopardy. He'll try to reclaim his investment, and when he does, I'll be waiting. Victor crossed to a cabinet and removed a small box. First, we make you disappear for a few days. You'll stay here. No one can enter this residence without my permission. Then, when Matthias is desperate enough, we let him find you. And then I negotiate. Vampire to vampire. Elena frowned. But you said he was a priest. I said he was dressed as a priest. Father Matthias was turned 200 years ago, during the Inquisition. He uses his sacred vestments as camouflage. Victor opened the box, revealing a pendant on a silver chain. This will mask your marked scent. Wear it at all times until we resolve this. He approached and held out the pendant. Elena took it, noting the intricate knotwork on the circular medallion, the strange symbols etched into the silver. When she clasped it around her neck, the metal felt warm against her skin, so different from Victor's cold touch. "What about my jobs?" she asked. "My roommates will worry. I can't just disappear." "Your jobs are irrelevant now. As for your roommates, I'll have someone deliver a message, a family emergency, perhaps. You'll be compensated for any lost wages." He moved toward a hallway. "Come, I'll show you where you'll sleep." Elena followed him through the apartment, too overwhelmed to argue about wages or jobs or normalcy. He led her to a bedroom that was larger than the basement she shared with two others, with a four-poster bed draped in dark silks and another wall of windows overlooking the glittering city. "The bathroom is through there," Victor said, indicating a door. "You'll find clothes in the closet that should fit. If you need anything, call for me. I'll hear you." "Where will you be?" "Making inquiries. I need to know who Matthias is selling to, and I need to set the stage for our trap." He paused in the doorway. "Try to rest, Elena. You're safe here, truly." After he left, Elena stood alone in the luxurious bedroom, still wearing her stained uniform, still trembling from adrenaline and terror. She walked to the windows and looked out at the city where she'd lived and worked in obscurity for years, where she'd been invisible to everyone except the vampire king who'd saved her life. The pendant around her neck pulsed with warmth, and she touched it, feeling the raised symbols under her fingers. Somewhere out there, someone had marked her for violation or death. Somewhere, a vampire waited to steal her body, her life, her very self. But here, in this moment, she was safe. Elena closed her eyes and let herself believe it. When Elena woke, disoriented, sunlight streamed through the windows. She'd collapsed on top of the silk covers fully clothed, too exhausted to even remove her shoes. Now she sat up, wincing at her stiff muscles, and realized she'd slept for hours. The sun was high, suggesting afternoon. The apartment was silent. She rose and explored the bathroom, finding it stocked with every luxury imaginable. Soaps that smelled of lavender and honey, towels so soft they felt like clouds, a shower with multiple heads and controls she couldn't decipher. She stripped off her uniform and stood under water so hot it turned her skin pink, scrubbing away the grime and fear of the previous night. The closet, when she opened it, contained women's clothing in her size. The realization that Victor had prepared for a female guest unsettled her, but she pushed the thought aside and selected dark jeans and a soft sweater. Everything fit perfectly, which was somehow more unnerving than if they hadn't. She found Victor in a study lined with books, sitting at a desk covered in papers and open volumes. He didn't look up when she entered. "There's food in the kitchen," he said. "I wasn't certain what you'd prefer, so I had several options delivered." Elena found the kitchen, a space of gleaming steel and black granite, and discovered containers of food that smelled incredible. She heated soup and made a sandwich, eating standing up, too nervous to sit. When she returned to the study, Victor was writing something in a language she didn't recognize. "I've identified the buyer," he said, without preamble. "Lord Cassius, an elder vampire from the European courts. He's been searching for a vessel for decades. Your blood type, your genetic markers, they're apparently quite rare. You're what they call a perfect vessel, someone who won't reject the consciousness transfer." Elena's sandwich turned to ash in her mouth. "Lucky me." "Cassius arrived in the city 2 days ago. Matthias likely marked you shortly after, once the deal was finalized." Victor set down his pen. The transaction was to take place tonight at the old Blackwood estate on the city's northern border. Matthias planned to deliver you personally. But I'm here instead. Yes, which means they're currently in a state of panic. He finally looked at her, his golden eyes unreadable. "I've sent word through intermediaries that I'm willing to negotiate. Cassius is old enough to respect the protocols. We'll meet tonight, neutral ground, and I'll make him an offer." "What kind of offer?" "The kind that ensures your safety without starting a war." Victor stood, moving to the window. Even in full sunlight, he cast a shadow. She'd half expected vampires to be insubstantial, but he was solidly, undeniably present. Cassius is wealthy and powerful, but he's not foolish. He won't risk the wrath of a territorial king over a single vessel, no matter how perfect. "You're going to buy me from him?" "In essence, yes. I'll compensate him for his investment and the inconvenience. Matthias, unfortunately, is more complicated. He violated the Concord by marking you without proper registration. That requires punishment." Elena set down her plate, appetite gone. "What happens to me after you buy me and punish the priest and negotiate with the elder vampire? Do I just go back to my 3 jobs and pretend none of this happened?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. "You can't go back," he said finally. "Even with the mark removed, you'll be known now. Other vampires will hear about the perfect vessel that slipped away. Some will respect the claim I've placed on you. Others won't. You'll need protection." "For how long?" "Indefinitely." Elena laughed, that same broken sound from the night before. "So, I'm a prisoner here. A very comfortable prisoner, but still a prisoner." "No." Victor turned to face her. "You'll be under my protection, which is different. You'll have freedom, resources, a life, just one lived within certain boundaries. You could work, study, pursue any interest you choose. You simply can't be alone and vulnerable the way you were before. Because now I'm valuable. Because now you're marked. And that mark, even after removal, will leave a trace. Think of it as a scar that certain creatures can detect." He moved closer. "I know this isn't the life you would have chosen, but it's the life that's available, and I promise you it will be better than 3 jobs in a basement room." "Is that supposed to comfort me? That my captivity will be comfortable?" "It's supposed to be honest." Victor's expression softened slightly. "I understand your anger. You've been thrust into a world you didn't know existed, marked by monsters, hunted by zealots, and now you're dependent on another monster for survival. It's terrifying and unfair. But I didn't create these circumstances, Elena. I'm simply offering you the best option within them." She wanted to argue, to rage, to demand he let her go. But the memory of the hunter's blades, the feeling of that invisible mark on her skin, the cold reality of Father Matthias's betrayal, it all settled on her shoulders like a weight she couldn't lift. "What happens tonight?" "I meet with Cassius at midnight. You'll remain here, protected by wards I'll reinforce before I leave. When I return, we'll perform the ritual to remove your mark." He paused. "There's a possibility the negotiation will go poorly. If Cassius refuses my offer, or if Matthias attempts something desperate, things could become violent. I want you prepared for that scenario." "What would you need me to do?" "Stay hidden. Don't leave this apartment under any circumstances." If someone manages to breach the wards, which is unlikely but possible, there's a panic room behind the bookshelf in the master bedroom. The entrance is hidden, but I'll show you before I leave. It's warded separately and supplied with everything you'd need to survive for days. Elena absorbed this. The casual mention of panic rooms and wards, the acceptance that violence might be necessary. This is really your life. Planning for battles and negotiations and protecting territory? It has been for 300 years. Victor returned to his desk. "You should rest more. Tonight will be long, and tomorrow we'll need to restructure your entire life. Sleep while you can." But Elena didn't sleep. She explored the apartment instead, discovering room after room filled with artifacts that must be centuries old. She found a library with volumes in dozens of languages, a music room with instruments she couldn't name, a gallery of paintings that depicted scenes from eras she'd only read about in history books. In the master bedroom, Victor showed her the panic room, hidden behind a bookshelf that swung open with the right pressure on a specific spine. Inside was a small space, with a bed, supplies, weapons, and a communication system. "If you have to use this," Victor said, "activate the beacon here. It will alert my allies. Don't leave until someone you recognize comes for you." Allies like who? Other vampires who owe me favors, witches I've made treaties with, a few humans who work in my organization. He demonstrated the beacon. "This world is larger than you know, Elena. The supernatural isn't just vampires and hunters. It's a whole ecosystem of species and factions, all trying to coexist under frameworks like the Concord. And you rule this ecosystem? In this city? I maintain order. There's a difference." Victor closed the panic room entrance. True ruling requires subjects who obey. "What I have are factions who recognize that cooperation serves their interests better than chaos. It's a constant negotiation, a balance that could shatter at any moment." Sounds exhausting. It is. He led her back to the main room. But it's also necessary. Before the Concord, this city was a killing ground. Vampires hunted openly. Hunters retaliated. Witches were burned. Werewolves were exterminated. It was carnage. The treaties brought peace, however fragile. Elena studied him, this ancient being who spoke of centuries and carnage with the same tone someone else might discuss the weather. "Why did you save me? You could have let the hunters kill me. It would have solved the problem without risking your precious Concord." Victor met her gaze, and for a moment she saw something raw in his golden eyes, something that looked almost human. "Because I've seen too many innocents die for the crimes of monsters. Because 300 years ago I failed to save someone I should have protected. And I've spent every night since trying to balance that debt." He turned away. "And because you reminded me of her. Same defiance in your eyes, even when facing death." Who was she? Someone I loved. Someone I failed. His voice was flat, emotionless. "She's gone now. The details don't matter." But Elena thought the details mattered very much. She didn't press, though. Instead, she asked, "What time do you leave?" 11. "I'll need an hour to reach the meeting site and verify it's secure." He glanced at her. "You should eat again. Build your strength. The mark removal ritual is painful." "Of course it is," Elena muttered. But she returned to the kitchen and forced herself to eat, to drink water, to prepare her body for whatever came next. As the sun set and darkness reclaimed the city, Victor prepared for the meeting. He changed into clothes that looked like they belonged to another century, a long coat, formal shirt, dark trousers that seemed both elegant and dangerous. He armed himself with weapons Elena couldn't name, blades that looked ancient and deadly. "Remember," he said at the door, "stay inside. Don't answer if anyone calls. If the wards break, you'll feel it, a sensation like ice water down your spine. That's when you run to the panic room." "I understand." Victor paused, his hand on the door. "I will come back, Elena, and when I do, this will be over. You'll be free of the mark." But not free. "No," he acknowledged, "not free, but alive and safe, and that's worth something." Then he was gone, and Elena was alone in the silent apartment, wearing borrowed clothes, bearing an invisible mark, waiting for a vampire king to negotiate for her life. She stood at the windows, watching the city lights, wondering if she'd ever feel normal again. Somewhere out there, Father Matthias was planning, scheming, trying to reclaim his prize. Somewhere, Lord Cassius waited to steal her body and walk in daylight. Somewhere, hunters sharpened their blades and prepared for the next marked human. And here, she waited. The pendant around her neck pulsed with warmth, steady as a heartbeat, reminding her that she was protected, claimed, valued, even if she didn't understand why. The midnight meeting took place in the ruins of Blackwood Estate, where old money had once thrown elaborate parties before scandal and decay claimed the property. Victor arrived early, as was his custom, checking the grounds for ambush points and escape routes. The moon was full, casting silver light through broken windows and collapsed sections of roof. He sensed Cassius before he saw him. The signature of an elder vampire was distinctive, carrying weight accumulated over centuries. The European lord materialized from shadow, flanked by two attendants who kept their distance, respectful of the neutral ground protocols. Lord Cassius was exactly as Victor remembered from their last meeting, decades ago. Pale and elegant, with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. He wore modern clothes, but carried himself like the nobleman he'd once been, back when Europe had kings and peasants and clear hierarchies. "Victor," Cassius greeted him, his accent still touched with French. "It has been too long, though I wish our reunion came under better circumstances." "As do I." Victor inclined his head, a gesture of respect between equals. "I trust my message was clear." "Perfectly. You've claimed the vessel I purchased. Quite the territorial display." Cassius moved through the ruined ballroom, his footsteps silent on debris-strewn marble. "I admit I'm curious about your interest. You've never been one to collect vessels. In fact, you've been quite vocal in your opposition to the practice." "My opposition stands, but circumstances have complicated this particular situation." "Because Father Matthias marked her without proper registration?" "Yes, I've learned about that unfortunate detail." Cassius turned, his expression neutral. "The good father assured me all protocols were followed. It seems he lied. Matthias has been operating outside Concord law for years. You know this. I know he has connections that make him useful, and that his products are quality. Or so I believed." Cassius approached, until only a few meters separated them. "Now I find myself in an awkward position. I've paid a considerable sum for a vessel I cannot claim without violating treaty law. Most inconvenient." Victor kept his voice steady. "I'm prepared to compensate you for your investment. Full price, plus an additional sum for the inconvenience and the risk to your reputation." "Generous." Cassius studied him with those ice-chip eyes. "But it raises questions." Why would the vampire king of 7 cities concern himself with one human girl? Why risk conflict with an elder lord over a marked vessel? Because she's innocent of any crime. Because Matthias violated her without consent. Because the hunters would have executed her for a mark she didn't choose. Victor met his gaze steadily. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because I'm tired of ancient vampires treating humans as commodities." "Ah, morality," Cassius smiled, showing fangs. "You always were the idealist, Victor. Even after 3 centuries, you cling to human notions of right and wrong. Is that a problem? Not at all. In fact, it makes this negotiation simpler." Cassius pulled a folded document from his coat. "This is the contract with Matthias. As you can see, I paid 50,000 for the vessel, with another 20 promised upon successful transfer." Victor scanned the document, noting the signatures, the terms. "I'll pay you 75,000. The additional 5 is for the breach of trust. Make it 100, and we have an agreement. I want compensation for the time I've wasted traveling to this provincial city, and for the difficulty I'll face finding another suitable vessel. 85. Final offer." Cassius considered, then extended his hand. Done. Transfer the funds to the account on the contract within 48 hours, and I'll consider this matter closed. They shook, the old ritual that bound vampire to vampire. Victor felt the agreement settle into place, a subtle weight that would enforce the terms until both sides fulfilled their obligations. One more thing, Cassius said. What do you want done about Matthias? He violated Concord law. That falls under my jurisdiction as territorial king. Then I relinquish any claim to his services or protection. Do as you wish. Cassius turned to leave, his attendants falling into step behind him. At the doorway, he paused. A word of advice, old friend. If you're going to save them all, you'll need more than money and morality. You'll need power enough to make the old ones afraid. Consider strengthening your alliances. Then he was gone, vanishing into the night with his entourage. Victor stood alone in the ruined ballroom, feeling both relieved and troubled. The negotiation had gone better than expected. Cassius could have demanded twice the amount, or refused to negotiate at all. But the Elder Lord's warning echoed unpleasantly. If other powerful vampires learned of Victor's intervention, learned that he'd paid a fortune to save one human girl, they might see it as weakness, or worse, as an opportunity. He pushed the thought aside and focused on the second problem. Father Matthias would know by now that the deal had collapsed, that Victor had claimed his prize. The former priest would be angry, desperate, possibly reckless. He needed to be dealt with before he marked another innocent or attempted to retaliate against Elena. Victor pulled out his phone and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. "Marcus," he said, "I need you to find Father Matthias. He's somewhere in the city, probably near St. Michael's Cathedral. Bring him to the warehouse on 5th Street. Use whatever force is necessary, but I want him alive." "Understood, my lord. Do you want him aware of why he's being brought in? Let him guess. Fear will make him more cooperative." Victor ended the call and left the estate, moving through the city with supernatural speed, checking his wards and boundaries, ensuring that no one had approached his residence while he was gone. Everything remained secure, the protective magic humming with power. When he entered the apartment, he found Elena exactly where he'd left her, standing at the windows, watching the city. She turned as he closed the door, her expression a mixture of hope and fear. "It's done," he said. "Cassius accepted my offer. You're no longer his property." Elena's legs seemed to give out. She sank onto the sofa, hands covering her face. "Thank God! Thank God!" Victor crossed to the bar and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He offered her one, and she took it with shaking hands. "There's still Matthias to deal with. My people are bringing him to a location where I can question him and determine appropriate punishment." "What kind of punishment?" "That depends on what I learn during questioning. At minimum, exile from this territory. At maximum—" He didn't finish, but his meaning was clear. Elena drank the whiskey in one long swallow. "When do we remove the mark?" "Tonight, once I've dealt with Matthias. The ritual requires certain components I need to retrieve from the warehouse, and I want to ensure he doesn't have any contingencies in place that might interfere with the mark's removal." "How long will you be gone?" "A few hours, dawn at most." Victor finished his own drink. "Try to rest while I'm gone. The ritual will be exhausting, and you'll need your strength." "I don't think I can sleep." "Then read. There are hundreds of books here, on any subject you can imagine. Distract yourself." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Elena, I know you didn't choose any of this, but I want you to know you're handling it with remarkable courage. Most humans would have broken by now. Maybe I'm just good at hiding it." Victor smiled, a rare expression that transformed his severe features. "Perhaps, But I've lived long enough to recognize true strength when I see it. You have it." Then he was gone again, and Elena was alone with books and luxury and fear that wouldn't quite release its grip on her throat. She tried reading, but the words blurred. She tried lying down, but anxiety kept her muscles tense. Finally, she returned to the windows, watching the city, waiting for dawn, praying that Victor's promise would hold. The warehouse on 5th Street was one of Victor's secure locations, a space reinforced with wards and protections, designed for questioning and containment. When he arrived, Marcus and 2 other trusted vampires were waiting, and Father Matthias was bound to a chair in the center of the empty space. The former priest looked older than he had in Elena's description. Stress had aged him, even for a vampire. His clerical collar was torn, and the ornate ring was missing from his finger. He glared at Victor with undisguised hatred. "You had no right," Matthias spat. "That vessel was legally purchased. The contract was binding." "The contract was based on fraud." Victor circled the chair, examining the captive vampire. "You marked her without registration, without permission from the territorial authority, in direct violation of Concord law. That makes the contract void and your actions criminal." "I've been marking vessels for 2 centuries. No one has ever—" "Because no one has caught you, or because you've been careful enough to avoid detection. But this time you were sloppy, and you targeted someone in my territory without my knowledge." Victor stopped in front of Matthias. "That ends now. You can't punish me without a trial. The Concord requires—" "The Concord gives me authority to enforce law within my territories. You violated that law. I am judge, jury, and executioner here." Victor leaned closer. "But I'll give you one chance to avoid the harshest penalties. Tell me everything. Who else have you marked in this city? Who are the buyers? What deals do you have pending?" Matthias's expression turned calculating. "If I cooperate, you'll let me live? I'll let you leave this city intact. You'll be exiled from all my territories, but you'll have your life and your freedom. Refuse, and I'll end you here and now, which is well within my rights under the laws you violated." The silence stretched. Victor could see Matthias weighing his options, calculating odds, trying to find an angle. Finally, the former priest slumped in his chair. "There are 3 others," he said quietly. 2 men, 1 woman, all marked within the past 6 months. The buyers are European elders, like Cassius. They pay well for perfect vessels, and this city has an unusually high concentration of suitable candidates. Names. Give me the names of the marked humans." Matthias provided them, along with addresses and details about the buyers. Victor committed every word to memory, already planning how to track down these innocents and offer them the same protection he'd given Elena. "The woman," Matthias added, "is already in the transfer process. The buyer took possession 2 days ago. By now, the ritual is complete." Victor's hands clenched into fists. "You let it happen. She signed a contract. She chose to sell her body for money. That makes her complicit, not a victim. The contract was signed under duress, after you manipulated her circumstances. Don't pretend this was consensual." Victor turned to Marcus. "Put out inquiries about the woman. If there's any chance she can be saved, we try. If not—" He didn't finish, but the weight of one more failure settled on his shoulders. He focused back on Matthias. "The mark on Elena. I need the counter-ritual, the components, the exact procedure. You're going to provide all of it. And then you exile me? Then I let you live. There's a difference. Matthias rattled off the ritual requirements. Specific herbs, blessed silver, blood freely given, words in Old Latin that hadn't been spoken in churches for centuries. Victor listened, occasionally asking clarifying questions, ensuring he had every detail correct. "One more thing," Victor said when Matthias finished. "Why Elena specifically? What made her the perfect vessel for Cassius? Her blood type, her genetic markers, her psychological profile, it all aligned. Plus, she had no family, no connections, no one who would miss her. She was invisible, which makes her ideal. No one investigates when invisible people disappear." Victor felt rage building in his chest, cold and controlled. She was invisible because people like you made her invisible. Because society failed her, and you exploited that failure. I provided a service. Buyers want vessels. I find them. It's simple economics. It's exploitation. It's evil. Victor nodded to Marcus. "Take him to the border. Make sure he understands that if he ever returns to any of my territories, his life is forfeit. Spread the word among the vampire community that Father Matthias is no longer under any protection. He's open game." Matthias's face went pale. "You're declaring open season on me? That's a death sentence. It's justice. You victimized dozens, maybe hundreds of innocents. Now you get to live with the fear you inflicted on others. Consider it penance." Victor turned away, dismissing him. "Get him out of my sight." As Marcus and the others dragged Matthias from the warehouse, the former priest's curses echoing off empty walls, Victor stood alone in the space and allowed himself one moment of rage. One moment to feel the full weight of what Matthias had done, what the system that allowed him to operate had done, what 3 centuries of watching humans suffer at the hands of his own kind had done. Then he locked the rage away, gathered the components for the mark removal ritual, and returned to the apartment where Elena waited. Dawn was breaking when he arrived, golden light spilling across the city. Elena had fallen asleep on the sofa, curled under a throw blanket, her face relaxed in sleep. She looked young, vulnerable, nothing like the defiant woman who'd taken his hand in the alley. Victor set down the ritual components and allowed himself the luxury of simply watching her for a moment. It had been so long since it felt protective of someone, so long since it cared about a single human life beyond abstract principles of justice. It should have concerned him, this sudden attachment. Instead, it felt almost like relief. Elena stirred and opened her eyes. When she saw him, she sat up quickly, blanket falling away. "Is it done? Did you find Matthias?" "It's done. He's been exiled and marked as unprotected. The supernatural community will know he has no allies, which makes him vulnerable." Victor moved to the kitchen area, unpacking the ritual components. "There are 3 others he marked. I'm having my people track them down and offer them protection. Will they accept? Some will. Others won't believe the danger until it's too late." He laid out herbs, silver bowls, candles inscribed with protective symbols. "But we'll try. That's all we can do." Elena joined him, looking at the ritual setup with apprehension. How bad is this going to be? "The pain will be significant but brief. The mark is tied to your life force, and severing that connection will hurt. But I'll be here, and it will be over quickly. What do I need to do?" "Stand in the center of the circle I'm about to draw. Remove your shirt. I need access to the mark. When I begin the incantation, don't move, no matter how much it hurts. If you break the circle before the ritual is complete, it could kill you." Elena nodded, her jaw set with determination. Victor drew the protective circle with blessed salt, placed the candles at precise points, prepared the herbs according to Matthias's instructions. When everything was ready, Elena stepped into the circle and removed her sweater, standing in just her jeans and bra, arms crossed over her chest. Victor could see the mark now, truly see it, a symbol burned into her skin at a level deeper than flesh, pulsing with malevolent energy. It made his ancient blood boil to see how Matthias had violated her, how the mark had literally changed her on a molecular level. "I'm ready," Elena said, though her voice shook. Victor began the incantation, words in Old Latin that resonated with power. He lit the herbs and let the smoke rise, surrounding Elena in purifying vapors. He took the blessed silver knife and cut his own palm, letting his blood, ancient vampire blood, drip onto the mark. Elena gasped as his blood touched her skin. The mark began to glow, fighting the ritual, trying to maintain its hold. Victor continued the incantation, pouring his will into the words, using centuries of accumulated power to break the binding. The mark flared brighter, and Elena screamed. Her body convulsed, but she stayed within the circle, hands clenched into fists, teeth gritted against the agony. Victor wanted to comfort her, to stop the pain, but he couldn't pause now. Stopping mid-ritual would be worse than never starting. He spoke the final words, threw the prepared powder into the circle, and commanded the mark to release its hold. There was a flash of light so bright Victor had to shield his eyes. When it faded, Elena was on her knees in the circle, gasping for breath, tears streaming down her face. And the mark, the terrible, invasive mark, was gone. Her skin was clear, unmarked, free. Victor broke the circle and rushed to her side, catching her before she collapsed completely. "It's done. You're free. The mark is gone." Elena clung to him, sobbing, her body shaking with reaction and relief. Victor held her, his cold hands gentle on her back, murmuring words of comfort in languages she didn't understand. He hadn't held someone like this in centuries, hadn't allowed himself the vulnerability of physical comfort. But Elena needed it, and somehow he needed it too. When her sobs finally subsided, she pulled back slightly, looking at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Thank you for everything. For saving me, for buying my freedom, for removing the mark. Thank you. You don't need to thank me for doing what's right. Yes, I do. You didn't have to care. You could have ignored me, let the hunters do their work, pretended I didn't exist. But you didn't. You saved me." She touched his face, her warm hand against his cold skin. Why? Really why? Victor could have deflected, could have given her the same answer he'd given before about old debts and ancient failures. Instead, he told her the truth. "Because when I saw you in that alley, facing death with defiance in your eyes, you reminded me of why I became a king in the first place. Not for power or territory or status, but to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. You reminded me of who I wanted to be 300 years ago, before centuries of compromise and politics made me forget."
"And who did you want to be?"
"Someone worthy of the power I possess, someone who uses strength to shield the weak, not exploit them." He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. "You should rest now. The ritual has exhausted you. Sleep, and when you wake, we'll discuss your future." But Elena didn't move toward the bedroom. Instead, she stayed close to him, her hand still on his arm.
"What if I don't want to discuss my future? What if I want to discuss yours?"
"Elena."
"You've been alone for a long time, haven't you? You talk about 3 centuries like it's nothing, but that's a long time to carry guilt and responsibility and leadership. That's a long time to be strong for everyone else." Victor should have stepped back, should have maintained the distance between them. But her warmth, her insight, her unexpected understanding, it undid something in him, some defense he'd maintained for too long. "Yes," he said simply. "It's been a very long time." Elena nodded, as if he'd confirmed something she'd suspected. "Thank you for being strong enough to save me, and for being honest enough to tell me the truth." She squeezed his arm gently, then released him.
ill rest now. But Victor, when I wake up, I want to know more about this world you've protected. I want to understand the Concord, the treaties, all of it. Because if I'm going to live in this world, I want to understand it. I'll teach you everything I know. She smiled, tired but genuine, and walked to the bedroom. Victor watched her go, feeling something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for centuries, thawing by degrees. When the door closed behind her, he cleaned up the ritual components, disposed of the herbs, washed the blood from his palm. The cut had already healed, vampire metabolism erasing evidence of the sacrifice. But the sensation of Elena's hand on his face remained, warm and real and dangerously tempting. Victor returned to his study and stared at the pile of paperwork on his desk, reports from his territories, disputes to mediate, threats to assess. The never-ending work of a king. But for the first time in years, he felt something beyond duty driving him. He felt purpose. Elena slept for 18 hours straight, her body recovering from the trauma of the mark removal ritual. When she finally woke, the sun was setting again, painting the apartment in shades of gold and amber. She showered and dressed in more borrowed clothes, then found Victor in the study, where he seemed to spend most of his time. "You look better," he observed, setting aside a letter-bound ledger. "I feel human again. It's strange." Elena sat across from him. "You said you'd teach me about this world. I'm ready to learn." For the next hours, as night claimed the city, Victor explained. He told her about the Concord, the treaty signed 2 centuries ago that brought peace between vampires, hunters, witches, werewolves, and a dozen other supernatural species. He explained territorial boundaries, how vampire kings maintained order, why the balance was so fragile. He told her about his own history. Born in the 1700s, turned during a plague outbreak by a vampire who wanted a companion, rising through vampire society through a combination of strategy and strength. He'd claimed his first territory a century after his turning, then expanded slowly, carefully, building a reputation for fairness and justice that attracted other vampires to his banner. "The old ones don't approve," Victor said. "Elders like Cassius believe in the traditional ways, vampires as apex predators, humans as cattle, power through fear and domination. I believe we can coexist with humans as partners, not prey. It makes me radical by vampire standards." Elena listened, absorbing information that would have seemed impossible 2 days ago. "The 3 others Matthias marked. Have you found them?" "2 of them. One accepted my protection. The other—" Victor's expression darkened. "He believed I was part of an elaborate prank. He refused to come with my people. By the time they convinced him of the danger, hunters had already found him." "His dead?" "Yes, executed yesterday evening, according to my sources." Victor stood and walked to the windows, his back to her. "I was too late." Again. Elena could hear the weight in that single word. Again. As if he carried a tally of every person he'd failed to save, every moment he'd arrived too late. "You can't save everyone." "I know, but I have to try." She joined him at the windows, standing close enough to feel the cold that radiated from him. "What about the woman? The one who's already been taken?" "I have people searching, but it's likely too late. Once the transfer is complete, the original consciousness is gone. The body walks and talks, but the person who inhabited it has been erased." His voice was flat, carefully emotionless. "It's why I consider the practice murder. The vampire might wear that human's body, but the human is dead." Elena shivered. That could have been her fate. Erased, stolen, replaced by a stranger wearing her skin. How do you live with this, knowing these things happen and you can't stop all of it? "I don't live with it. I endure it. There's a difference." Victor finally turned to look at her. "But moments like this, When I do save someone, when I do make a difference, those moments make the endurance worthwhile. I still don't understand why me specifically. You said I reminded you of someone you failed, but there's more to it than that. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to the bar and poured 2 glasses of dark wine, offering her one. Her name was Catherine. She was human, brilliant and kind, working as a teacher in a village outside my first territory. I met her by accident. She was defending a child from a rogue vampire, armed with nothing but a fireplace poker and absolute conviction that she could protect that child. Did she? Yes. I arrived in time to stop the vampire, but the damage was done. The entire village had seen supernatural creatures in action. The Concord required mind-wiping to protect the secret, but Catherine refused. She wanted to remember, wanted to understand this hidden world. Victor sipped his wine. I made her a deal. I'd let her keep her memories if she'd help me establish better human-vampire relations in my territory. She agreed. Elena could hear the affection in his voice, even across centuries. You loved her. I did. For 30 years we worked together. She helped me understand humans in ways I'd forgotten after my turning. She established schools, hospitals, community centers, all funded by my resources but guided by her vision. She made my territory the most progressive in Europe. What happened to her? Old age. She lived a full life by human standards, but I wanted more time. I offered to turn her, to make her immortal, to give us centuries together. She refused. Victor's expression was distant, lost in memory. She said I needed to learn to love humans as they were, temporary, fragile, mortal. That if I only valued people I could keep forever, I'd never truly appreciate humanity. That's why you don't turn people, why you resist the old ways. Catherine taught me that immortality isn't a gift if it requires losing your humanity. Some vampires maintain their compassion after turning, but most don't. The hunger changes you, makes you see humans differently. She didn't want that for herself, and she made me promise I'd never turn someone without exhausting every other option first. Elena absorbed this, understanding Victor better now. I look like her? No, you look nothing like her. But that defiance in your eyes, that refusal to surrender even when facing impossible odds, that's pure Catherine. When I saw you in that alley, for just a moment, I thought I'd been given a second chance to save her. He set down his glass. Foolish, I know. You're not her, and I'm not trying to replace her. But that initial instinct to protect you, that came from a very old wound. It's not foolish, it's human. Elena smiled at the irony. Even after 300 years as a vampire, you're still remarkably human. Catherine would be pleased to hear you say that. She always insisted I hadn't lost myself to the monster, despite my fears. Victor moved closer to Elena, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes. But you need to understand something. I've saved you. I've given you protection, but I can't promise you a normal life. Even with the mark gone, your blood chemistry still makes you desirable to vampires who know about perfect vessels. You'll always be vulnerable. So what do I do? Hide in this apartment forever? No. You build a life within the boundaries of safety. You learn to defend yourself. You become part of this world instead of a victim of it. He reached out and took her hand, his cold fingers wrapping around her warm ones. I'm offering you more than protection, Elena. I'm offering you a place in my organization, training in supernatural defenses, knowledge that most humans never access. You could become a liaison between human and vampire communities, like Catherine was. You could make a real difference. Elena looked down at their joined hands. Warmth and cold, human and vampire, life and something beyond life. Would I have to give up my humanity, become a vampire? Never. Not unless you chose it freely, and even then, I'd try to talk you out of it. Victor squeezed her hand gently. I need people who understand both worlds, who can stand in the middle and help maintain balance. You could be that person, if you're willing. And if I'm not? If I want to go back to my 3 jobs and my basement room and my invisible life, then I'd let you go, with enough money to start over somewhere safer and protection from a distance. I won't hold you prisoner, Elena, but I think you'd be wasting remarkable courage and strength if you chose invisibility again. Elena thought about her old life, the exhaustion, the loneliness, the feeling that she was just surviving rather than living. She thought about the past 2 days, the terror and pain and revelation. And she thought about Victor, this ancient vampire who'd saved her because she reminded him of someone who taught him to stay human despite the monster he'd become. "I'll stay," she said finally, "not because I'm afraid to leave, but because I think you're right. I think I could make a difference here. And I think," she paused, uncertain, "I think I want to understand you better. This world, these responsibilities, this burden you carry. I want to help, if I can." Victor's expression softened into something almost like relief. "Then tomorrow, we begin your training. I'll teach you about supernatural threats, defensive techniques, the politics of the Concord. You'll meet my allies, learn how to navigate this world safely, and in time, you'll find your own place in it. Will it be dangerous? Yes. Always. But you'll have me protecting you and an entire network of resources. You'll be safer than you were in that basement room, even if you're more aware of the threats." Elena nodded, accepting this new reality. "One more question. The woman Matthias sold, the one who's already been transferred, is there any chance she's actually still in there? Any chance the original person survived somehow?" Victor's expression turned grim. "In 300 years, I've never heard of a successful resistance. The ritual overwrites the human consciousness completely. Why?" "Because if there's even a small chance, we should try to save her. We should at least look." Elena met his eyes steadily. "You taught me about second chances and refusing to give up. Let me start applying those lessons now." For a long moment, Victor simply looked at her. Then he smiled, a real smile, not the careful expression he usually wore, but something genuine and warm that transformed his features. "Catherine would have liked you very much. She'd probably say you're a terrible influence on me, encouraging my idealistic tendencies." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes. We'll look for her, and if there's any chance of saving her, any possibility of reversing the transfer, we'll find it." Victor pulled Elena closer, wrapping her in an embrace that was cold but comforting. "Welcome to the war for humanity's soul, Elena. I hope you don't come to regret your choice." Elena leaned into the embrace, accepting the chill, feeling safe despite the danger she knew surrounded them. "I won't regret it. This feels right, like I'm finally doing something that matters." "It matters more than you know." They stood like that for a long time, vampire and human, king and protected, 2 people finding unexpected connection in a world of monsters and treaties and ancient wounds. Outside the windows, the city glowed with lights, unaware of the supernatural battles fought in shadows, the fragile peace maintained by creatures like Victor, the innocents like Elena, who stumbled into hidden wars and somehow found purpose. And in that moment, Victor felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he could build something better than survival. Hope that Elena's courage and Catherine's legacy might combine into something that could actually change the supernatural world for the better. Hope that he wasn't alone anymore. 6 months later, Elena stood in the same warehouse where Victor had questioned Father Matthias, but now the space had been transformed. Instead of bare concrete and binding circles, it held rows of chairs filled with humans who'd been marked, rescued, and trained. They'd come from across Victor's territories, drawn by rumors of sanctuary, seeking the protection only a vampire king could provide. Elena wore different clothes now, not borrowed luxury, but her own chosen style, practical and confident. She'd trained with vampires, witches, and hunters who'd defected from their guilds. She'd learned defensive magic, negotiation tactics, the intricate politics of the Concord. And she'd found her calling in teaching others like herself, humans who'd been thrust into the supernatural world and needed guidance to survive it. "Thank you," she said to the assembled group. "I know many of you are frightened. Some of you probably don't believe any of this is real, even after everything you've seen. But I'm here to tell you that you're safe now, and that there's a path forward." She told them her story, the attack in the alley, the mark she'd carried, the ritual that freed her. She explained Victor's vision of human-vampire cooperation, the work they were building together. And she offered them the same choice she'd been given: return to their old lives with protection and resources, or stay and learn to navigate this new world. Most chose to stay. Victor watched from the back of the warehouse, pride evident in his expression. Elena had become everything he'd hoped: a bridge between worlds, a teacher, a force for change. She'd helped him locate and rescue 2 more marked humans. She'd negotiated with witch covens for protective charms. She'd even convinced 3 hunter guilds to work with Victor's organization instead of against it. And she'd done it all while remaining absolutely human. "You were right about her," Marcus said quietly, appearing beside Victor. "Catherine would have approved." "She would have claimed credit for the idea," Victor replied with a slight smile. "Catherine always believed that saving one person could change everything, if you saved the right person." "Do you think Elena knows?" "Knows what?" "That you're in love with her." Victor was silent for a long moment. "I'm not in love with her. I respect her, value her work, appreciate her courage. But love is too dangerous, too complicated. I made that mistake once, and when Catherine died, it nearly destroyed me." Marcus made a skeptical sound. "You look at Elena the same way you looked at Catherine, like she's sunlight and you've been in darkness for centuries." "That's poetic nonsense. That's truth, and you know it." Marcus moved toward the door. "For what it's worth, I think she feels the same way. The way she talks about you when you're not around, the way she defends your vision to skeptics, that's not just professional respect. That's something deeper." After Marcus left, Victor remained in the shadows, watching Elena interact with the rescued humans. She was explaining defensive wards, demonstrating protective gestures, laughing at someone's nervous joke. She was brilliant and kind and exactly the sort of person who could make a real difference in this world. And Marcus was right. Victor was in love with her. He'd fought it for months, telling himself it was just residual emotion from Catherine's memory, just appreciation for a valuable ally, just the natural satisfaction of protecting someone successfully. But the truth was undeniable. Elena had worked her way into his heart with the same defiance she'd shown in that alley, the same courage that had made him save her life. The question was what to do about it. Had promised himself after Catherine that he wouldn't love another mortal, wouldn't put himself through the agony of watching someone age and die while he remained unchanged. But Elena wasn't Catherine, and this wasn't the same situation. Elena knew what he was, accepted the supernatural world, understood the costs and complications. Maybe this time could be different. As the training session ended and people began filing out, Elena spotted Victor in the shadows. She smiled and walked over, tired but satisfied. "That went well. I think we'll get at least 10 new recruits for the liaison program. You're a natural teacher. You make complicated concepts accessible. I had a good instructor. She touched his arm, the gesture natural and affectionate. "Are you still coming to dinner tomorrow? I'm cooking and I promise not to burn anything this time." Over the past months, they'd fallen into routines. Shared meals, strategy sessions that lasted until dawn, walks through the city while Victor explained the hidden supernatural geography. It was partnership, friendship, and something neither of them had named. "I'll be there," Victor said, "though I maintain that your first attempt at pasta was more cremated than burned." Elena laughed. "That was one time, and in my defense, I was distracted by the report about the rogue vampire nest." Excuses. They walked out of the warehouse together, into the night air that no longer felt threatening to Elena. She'd learned to see the city differently now, not as a collection of dangers, but as a web of communities, supernatural and human, all trying to coexist. It was messy and complicated and sometimes violent, but it was also full of possibility. "Victor," she said as they reached his car, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "When you talk about Catherine, you always sound sad but also grateful, like the pain was worth it because of what you had together. Do you still believe that loving someone mortal is worth the inevitable loss?" Victor studied her, understanding immediately what she was really asking. "Yes, I believe every moment with Catherine was worth the grief that came after. She made me better, made my existence meaningful in ways power and territory never could." He moved closer to Elena. "And I believe I'd be a fool to refuse that gift twice simply because I'm afraid of pain." Elena's breath caught. "You're talking about us. I'm talking about the possibility of us, if that's something you'd want." For a moment, Elena couldn't speak. Then she smiled, that brilliant expression that never failed to move him. "I've wanted that for months. I just didn't think you'd be interested in someone so temporary." "You're not temporary. You're exactly as long as you're meant to be, and I'll treasure every moment I'm given." Victor took her hand, no longer cold to her touch, or perhaps she'd simply grown accustomed to his temperature. "But you need to understand what you'd be choosing. I can't give you a normal life or a safe life. I can't promise you decades of peace. All I can offer is partnership, protection, and whatever love a 300-year-old vampire still remembers how to feel." "That sounds perfect," Elena said simply. "When do we start?" Victor laughed, the sound rare and genuine. "Right now, if you're ready." He kissed her then, there in the parking lot of a warehouse where they trained rescued humans, under stars hidden by city lights. It was gentle and careful and full of restrained passion, the kiss of someone who'd waited centuries to feel this way again. When they finally pulled apart, Elena touched his face, her warm hand against his cold cheek. "Thank you for saving me, not just from the hunters, but from invisibility, from a life that was just survival. You gave me purpose and meaning, and now this. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me why I became a king in the first place, why the work matters, why every saved life is worth the effort." Victor pulled her close, holding her against his chest. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever, hope for the future." They stood like that for a long time, vampire and human, king and liaison, partners in an impossible war for humanity's soul. Around them, the city continued its nightly rhythms, unaware of the moment unfolding in that parking lot, unaware of the love taking root between creatures who shouldn't have been able to love at all. But they did love, and that love would become the foundation for everything they built together, a new kind of supernatural alliance, a better version of the Concord, a world where marked humans could be saved instead of executed, where vampires and humans worked together instead of living in fear. It started in an alley with hunters and silver blades. It grew in an apartment where a vampire king taught a waitress about hidden worlds. And it bloomed in a parking lot where two people who'd been alone too long finally found each other. The future was uncertain, dangerous, full of challenges neither of them could predict, but they'd face it together, and that made all the difference. As Victor drove them back to the apartment they now shared, Elena looked out at the city and felt something she'd never experienced in her years of invisibility. She felt seen, valued, cherished. She felt like she mattered. And she knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice that night in the alley when she took the Vampire King's cold hand and let him lead her into this impossible, dangerous, beautiful life. Some love stories begin with flowers and poetry. Theirs began with violence and vampires. But it was love nonetheless, and it was worth every moment of fear and pain and uncertainty that brought them together. The night stretched ahead, full of possibility. They drove into it together.